Remove this homeless old man from my lobby immediately before his dirty clothes ruin our reputation," Mr. Henderson shouted coldly. His harsh, bureaucratic voice cut through the sterile, quiet air of the private hospital's grand entrance like a sharp knife. Grace stood firmly between her arrogant director and the trembling, elderly blind man who was shivering violently from the freezing storm. She looked at the patient's pale face and deep, labored breathing, knowing that throwing him out would be a literal death sentence. She refused to step aside, openly defying the most powerful administrator in the entire healthcare system to protect a human life. Mr. Henderson's face turned a dangerous shade of red as he stepped closer, his eyes filled with pure corporate arrogance. He did not care about the medical oath or the fact that the elderly stranger was in desperate physical agony. He grabbed a set of official disciplinary forms from the front desk and signed his name with a cruel, heavy stroke. He coldly informed Grace that her promising career at the hospital was officially over for this sudden act of insubordination. He gave her exactly 3 minutes to leave the building, believing that a young doctor would easily crumble under his weight. But as Grace gently took the old man's icy hand, a profound and dangerous shift was already happening in the room. The elderly patient, Samuel, raised his head slightly, his sightless eyes hidden behind worn glasses as he listened to Grace's voice. For months, he had lived in absolute isolation, but he recognized that specific, compassionate tone from a deeply personal part of his past. Mr. Henderson believed he was simply cleaning up his beautiful lobby by discarding a helpless, penniless vagrant into the dark night. He had absolutely no idea that he had just insulted a powerful retired federal judge who held his future. Grace had spent her entire youth working double shifts to survive and graduate from medical school with honors. She did not come from a family of wealthy professionals, and every milestone she achieved was built on pure sacrifice. Her heart was deeply rooted in the true essence of healing, a quality that made her popular among patients. To her, a hospital was a sacred sanctuary of mercy, not a cold corporate machine designed to maximize financial profit. But tonight, her stubborn commitment to those high moral values had cost her everything she had fought to build. On the other side of the sterile room, Judge Samuel Vance sat quietly, his weathered face showing deep resilience. He had spent 40 years serving the federal courts, upholding absolute justice while hiding his own growing personal darkness. After losing his sight and his beloved wife, he had retreated into a quiet world of memories and books. His only comfort during those lonely months was a series of beautifully recorded audio stories for the blind community. The soft, compassionate voice of the volunteer reader had been the single anchor holding his fragile mind together. As the cold autumn rain continued to beat against the hospital windows, Samuel listened closely to Grace's breathing. He could hear the heavy, emotional exhaustion in her movements, but he also recognized the fierce bravery in her tone. She had risked her medical license and her entire economic future just to give a stranger a chance. For years, Samuel had been the one delivering absolute verdicts from a high, decorated bench in a courtroom. Now, in the quiet shadows of this medical emergency, he was preparing to write his most important judgment. Grace knew that Mr. Henderson would monitor the main security cameras to ensure she left the building immediately. Instead of walking toward the exit, she quietly wheeled Samuel's chair down a narrow, dimly lit service hallway. She bypassed the main computer network and brought him into an abandoned triage room near the old clinic. Her hands moved with practiced, efficient speed as she attached a warm blanket and a hidden oxygen monitor. As she carefully removed his wet, heavy coat, a small leather-bound notebook fell from his pocket onto the floor. The old notebook popped open upon impact, revealing a series of official federal documents tucked inside the sleeves. Grace knelt down to gather the scattered pages, her eyes scanning the official stamps and gold embossed seals. She saw a lifetime of high-level legal credentials, private government telephone numbers, and a signed presidential commendation letter. Her breath caught in her throat as she read the large, bold letters printed on the main identification card. The freezing, helpless traveler she had just saved from the street was actually one of the most powerful legal figures. She stared at the document in absolute disbelief, realizing the massive scale of the corporate disaster Mr. Henderson had created. Samuel noticed her sudden, heavy silence and reached his hand out into the empty air, smiling very softly. He asked her if she had finally discovered his small secret behind those old, dirty clothes of his. Grace opened her mouth to speak, but before she could utter a single word, a loud noise echoed. The heavy steel door of the hidden room was violently thrown open, revealing a terrifying security team. 2 large, uniformed security guards stepped into the small room, their faces completely cold and devoid of empathy. They explained that Mr. Henderson had seen her movements on the secondary monitor and ordered her immediate removal. Grace stood her ground, her body shielding the frail, exhausted judge who was still fighting to breathe properly. The guards did not care about the medical charts or the severe danger of the cold night. They roughly grabbed her shoulder, treating a dedicated, professional doctor like a common criminal inside her own workplace. Samuel felt the sudden tension in the air, his fingers tightening firmly around his vintage wooden walking cane. He raised his commanding voice, ordering the guards to take their hands off the young lady this instant. The security men simply laughed at his words, completely blind to the immense authority hidden beneath his clothes. They told the old man that his time in the warm building had officially run out tonight. They began to wheel his chair back toward the exit, ignoring Grace's desperate, loud pleas for human decency. Grace felt a profound wave of helplessness wash over her as they were pushed out into the rain. The heavy steel side doors clicked locked behind them, leaving them completely alone in the dark, freezing storm. She had lost her career, her pride, and her only way to help a dying, innocent man. As she wiped the cold water from her eyes, she looked down at Samuel's pale, shivering face. Suddenly, a long, black luxury vehicle pulled up to the curb, its headlights cutting through the fog. The door of the luxury black vehicle opened quickly, and a serious man in a professional suit stepped out. He did not look at Grace, but instead bowed his head with immense respect toward the shivering old gentleman. He wrapped a thick, warm wool blanket around Samuel's shoulders and gently helped him into the spacious vehicle. Samuel firmly refused to leave without the brave young doctor who had risked everything to protect his life. Grace hesitated for a single second in the freezing rain before stepping inside the beautiful, warm car. As the vehicle moved smoothly into the dark night, the quiet interior felt like an entirely different world. Samuel leaned back against the leather seat, his breathing finally becoming stable as the vehicle's heater warmed him. He turned his sightless eyes toward Grace and softly thanked her for her incredible, rare courage in that lobby. He revealed that he had been secretly testing the hospital's true moral character before making a final choice. But more importantly, he explained that her beautiful, compassionate voice was already deeply familiar to his lonely heart. Grace looked at him in total surprise, her mind trying to connect his words to her past. Samuel explained that he was the primary patron of the city's volunteer audio program for blind citizens. He had listened to her reading classical literature and poetry for over 2 long, isolated winter years. Her voice had been his only comfort after his wife passed, giving him a true reason to survive. He smiled gently as the car stopped, telling her they had arrived at a place where justice lived. The luxury car pulled up to the private entrance of a massive, historic stone courthouse downtown. Inside his warm office, Samuel did not need eyes to command the room with absolute, effortless power. He placed 2 quick phone calls to the state medical board and the chief governor of healthcare. Within less than an hour, a heavy stack of official federal injunctions was printed and sealed. The old judge looked at Grace, assuring her that a career built on empathy could never be destroyed. He explained that true justice does not merely react, but completely rewrites the balance of power. Mr. Henderson believed his hospital board position made him untouchable to ordinary citizens in the city. He did not know that Samuel was the chairman of the trust funding their entire expansion. The arrogant director had spent months begging for a multi-million-dollar federal grant to save his career. Samuel was about to deliver an answer that the greedy manager would never forget until his last day. At exactly 7 in the morning, the black sedan returned to the hospital's grand entrance. Grace stepped out of the car, her uniform clean and her posture radiating a calm confidence. Samuel walked right beside her, his elegant wooden cane, striking the floor with a rhythmic, powerful sound. The security guards in the lobby froze in absolute shock when they saw the pair returning. They walked straight toward the main boardroom, where an unexpected, terrifying legal trap was already waiting. Mr. Henderson was standing at the head of the long mahogany boardroom table, smiling at his wealthy investors. He was confidently presenting the grand architectural blueprints for the hospital's expensive new luxury wing for rich patients. The heavy glass doors suddenly swung open without warning, cutting his arrogant presentation short in a second. His face instantly twisted in extreme anger when he saw Grace walking into the room beside the old man. He stepped forward quickly, raising his voice to demand that the security team drag them both out. The room fell into a sudden, freezing silence as Samuel raised his dark wooden cane with absolute command. The wealthy investors around the table gasped loudly, immediately standing up from their leather chairs with deep respect. They recognized the legendary federal judge instantly, knowing his immense reputation could make or break any institution. Mr. Henderson froze in total confusion, his eyes darting between his wealthy board members and the blind traveler. He realized with a sinking heart that the helpless vagrant from last night held absolute authority. Samuel took a slow, powerful step toward the manager, his voice echoing with the weight of 40 years of law. He did not yell, but every word he spoke carried a devastating psychological pattern that shattered Henderson's pride. He revealed to the entire board how the director had brutally denied emergency care to an innocent citizen. The investors looked at Mr. Henderson with pure disgust as a state official stepped into the room. The cold bureaucrat began to tremble violently as the legal trap closed tightly around his neck. The official state representative placed a heavy file of emergency legal sanctions directly onto the mahogany table. Mr. Henderson's hands shook so violently that he dropped his expensive gold pen onto the concrete floor. The documents declared an immediate, total freeze on all federal funding and corporate investments for the hospital. Furthermore, Mr. Henderson was stripped of his medical administrative license for severe, documented gross negligence of a patient. He had gone from a powerful, untouchable director to a completely ruined man in a single minute. Samuel turned his head toward Grace, his stern, judicial expression softening into a look of deep pride. He officially announced that the board had unanimously voted to restructure the entire healthcare facilities management team. Grace was appointed as the new chief medical director, giving her absolute control over all patient care. She would no longer have to beg cold bureaucrats for the right to save a human life. The entire room erupted into warm applause as the broken, disgraced former manager packed his things. Grace stood there in absolute disbelief, tears of pure joy finally breaking through her professional composure. She had risked her entire future for an unknown stranger, and now she held the hospital's destiny. Samuel walked over to her side, a quiet, knowing smile gracing his weathered, elegant old face. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, beautifully wrapped vintage silver box. He told her that this final token held a secret that would connect their lives forever. Grace carefully opened the small silver box, her eyes catching the delicate reflection of the morning light. Inside, she found a beautifully preserved medical medal of honor from the city's oldest charitable foundation. On the back of the medal, her own late grandfather's name was neatly engraved in classical letters. Samuel explained that her grandfather had been the young physician who saved his sight during a war. The old judge had spent decades looking for a member of that brave family to repay. He realized that Grace's voice in the audio program was not a coincidence, but a beautiful destiny. By standing up for a helpless stranger in the dark, she had completed a sacred circle of kindness. Grace felt a profound wave of emotional peace wash over her soul as she held the medal. She realized that every long, exhausting hour she spent studying had a much greater, divine purpose. The hospital was finally under the care of a heart that truly understood the law. 2 weeks later, the grand entrance of the hospital looked completely different, filled with warm, welcoming faces. Grace walked through the bright lobby as the official director, her eyes shining with absolute determination. Samuel sat quietly on a comfortable bench nearby, listening to the peaceful movement of the healthy patients. The cold, corporate shadow was gone forever, replaced by a permanent sanctuary of true human healing. A beautiful new journey of empathy and justice had officially begun for the entire community.
Have you ever stopped to consider that the most powerful force in the universe might be completely invisible to the human eye? We spend our entire lives chasing visual status, beautiful faces, and material wealth, completely forgetting the hidden frequencies that connect our souls. Sometimes, a single voice speaking out in the cold darkness carries a heavy emotional pattern capable of stopping a broken heart from fading away entirely. This narrative explored a deep psychological truth about how a quiet, unseen bond can destroy an act of pure arrogance when we least expect it. It is deeply fascinating how life finds a way to balance the scales of justice when people misuse their power. Mr. Henderson believed his status gave him the right to discard a gentle soul, completely blind to the fact that his own survival depended on the very man he tried to destroy. This story leaves us with a profound, beautiful reflection. True human value cannot be measured by a title on an office door or a stack of money, but by the quiet comfort we offer to others when they are at their lowest point. Has a complete stranger ever stepped into your life at your darkest hour, offering a small act of kindness that completely saved you? Please share your experience in the comments below. Your story and your voice truly matter to this community. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thank you for listening.